The heavy thud of rain against the old farmhouse roof sounded like whispers to Clara's ears. She sat at the kitchen table staring at her phone. No service. The storm had cut them off completely. The nearest neighbor was miles away, and her husband, Mark, wouldn't be back until morning. It was just her and the house. The silence stretched long between the drumming rain and the occasional groan of the wooden beams. The old house was alive in its way, breathing, shifting. She told herself it was normal. Houses settled, didn't they? But it didn't feel like settling. It felt expectant. Clara's gaze wandered to the back door. The lock was rusty but intact. She reminded herself of that every few minutes, but the unease in her chest refused to quiet. The barn. It was always the barn that unsettled her the most about this place. Her mind wandered back to the first time they'd found the cellar beneath it, hidden under a loose floorboard. Mark had joked about it being a storm shelter, but something about its sheer depth, cut into the earth like a black wound, had made her stomach churn. He'd boarded it up tight, but not tight enough to keep her dreams from going there. The sound of breaking glass snapped Clara's head toward the living room. Her breath caught in her throat. She waited, heart thundering. The sound of the storm swallowed the house whole, masking whatever had caused it. "Hello," she called, her voice trembling as she stood. No answer. The kitchen light flickered, casting sharp shadows that seemed to shift and writhe before they stilled again. Clara grabbed a flashlight from the counter. She hesitated, staring down the dim hallway toward the living room. She thought about calling Mark, but her phone mocked her with its empty signal bars. "Probably just the wind," she muttered. The living room was empty. The broken window, now a jagged grin of shattered glass, gaped wide at her. Cold air spilled through, carrying with it the scent of wet soil. Clara moved cautiously toward it, shining the flashlight out into the yard. The barn loomed like a dark sentinel at the edge of the property. Something moved. Her beam caught it. A figure, low to the ground, crawling on all fours toward the barn. Clara's breath hitched. "Who's there?" It stopped. Its head jerked up sharply, unnaturally, like a marionette being yanked by unseen strings. She couldn't see its face, just a glint of light on wet, pallid skin. She backed away, her pulse a drumbeat in her ears. The figure didn't follow, but instead slipped into the darkness, disappearing behind the barn. Clara locked the door and pressed her back against it, clutching the flashlight like a lifeline. She needed to call someone, the police, anyone. The house groaned again, louder this time, the sound coming from directly above her. Her blood turned cold as she slowly tilted her head upward. Something was moving in the attic. The attic hatch creaked as it was pushed open from the other side. She froze, staring at the panel in the ceiling. The darkness up there seemed alive, thick and tangible. "Mark," she whispered, though she knew it wasn't him. A hand, pale, bony, and impossibly long, reached down, its fingers curling around the edge of the hatch. Clara screamed and bolted for the back door. She fumbled with the lock, threw it open, and ran into the storm. The rain was blinding, and the mud sucked at her boots as she sprinted for the truck, parked near the barn. She didn't see it until it was too late. The figure from before stood in her path, its face now illuminated by a flash of lightning. Its skin was stretched too tight over a skull that didn't seem quite human, and its mouth stretched impossibly wide, a cavern of jagged teeth. Clara skidded to a halt, falling backward into the mud. The thing moved toward her, impossibly fast, closing the distance in seconds. She scrambled back, screaming, her hands clawing at the wet earth. And then the ground beneath her gave way. She fell into the cellar. The air was thick with the stench of rot and something far worse. Her flashlight had landed a few feet away, casting a weak, flickering beam. She crawled toward it, her hands sinking into the wet, loamy soil. Something moved in the darkness with her. She could hear it breathing, wet, rasping, inhuman. Clara grabbed the flashlight and swung it wildly, illuminating a wall of dirt and bone. The remains were old, some little more than fragments, but the smell was fresh. The breathing grew louder, closer. She turned the flashlight toward the sound, and there it was, not one but many. Twisted, emaciated bodies crawling from the earth, their mouths agape in silent screams, their hands reaching for her. Clara screamed as they closed in, their bony fingers clawing at her, pulling her deeper into the soil. The flashlight flickered once, twice, and then died, leaving her alone in the suffocating dark. Clara's scream echoed through the darkness, swallowed by the earth itself. She could feel the cold, skeletal hands pulling her down, their grip tightening. But then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. Silence. The ground beneath her seemed to solidify, and the hands vanished. Clara lay there panting, her heart pounding in her chest, and then a faint light appeared in the distance. She crawled toward it, every muscle in her body screaming in protest. As she got closer, the light grew brighter, revealing a hidden chamber. The walls were lined with ancient symbols and artifacts, glowing with an otherworldly light. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, and on it an old leather-bound book. Clara reached for the book, her fingers trembling. The moment she touched it, the room was flooded with visions, images of the twisted figures, their tortured past, and the dark force that bound them to this place. She saw the source of the curse, a relic buried deep beneath the house, feeding on the souls of the lost. With a surge of determination, Clara knew what she had to do. The revelation had given her the key to ending the nightmare. She clutched the book to her chest and turned to face the darkness once more, ready to confront the evil that lurked beneath the soil. Music swells to a climactic crescendo, then fades to silence. The battle was far from over, but Clara was no longer afraid. The revelation had armed her with knowledge, and she would use it to break the curse and free the trapped souls. One way or another, the nightmare would end. Clara's breath came in ragged gasps as she sprinted through the labyrinthine corridors of the underground chamber. The ancient book clutched tightly in her hands, its weight a constant reminder of the burden she bore. Behind her, the walls seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy, the twisted figures she had seen in her visions now emerging from the shadows, their hollow eyes fixed on her. She turned a corner, her feet barely touching the ground, and found herself in a narrow passageway. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the oppressive darkness seemed to close in around her. Clara's heart pounded in her chest, but she pushed forward, driven by the knowledge that the relic, the source of the curse, was within reach. Suddenly the ground beneath her feet began to tremble, and the walls shuddered as if the very earth was trying to swallow her whole. Clara stumbled, nearly losing her grip on the book, but she caught herself and pressed on. Ahead she could see a faint glimmer of light, a beacon in the darkness. As she neared the light, the passageway opened into a cavernous chamber. In the center of the room, a stone altar stood, and atop it the cursed relic glowed with an eerie, unnatural light. The twisted figures closed in, their skeletal hands reaching for her, but Clara's determination burned brighter than ever. She knew what she had to do. With a final desperate burst of speed, Clara reached the altar and slammed the book down beside the relic. The moment the two touched, a blinding light erupted from the altar, enveloping the chamber. The twisted figures recoiled, their anguished wails echoing through the darkness. Clara shielded her eyes, feeling the energy surge around her. The ground shook violently and the chamber began to collapse. She turned and ran, the light guiding her way. As she reached the passageway, she could feel the walls closing in, the darkness threatening to consume her. But Clara didn't stop. She sprinted through the corridors, her heart racing, until she finally saw the faint outline of the exit. With one last desperate leap, she burst through the opening and into the cool night air. She collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath, and looked back at the house. The ancient structure shuddered and groaned, then began to crumble, the curse finally broken. Clara closed her eyes, a sense of peace washing over her. The nightmare was over. The escape had been harrowing, but Clara had done it. The curse was broken, and the souls were free. She had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. Now, at last, she could rest. Music swells to a climactic crescendo, then fades to silence. The night was still, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and lingering fear. Clara lay on the ground, her breath slowing, her mind reeling from the ordeal she had just endured. Around her, the remnants of the ancient house smoldered, the once formidable structure now reduced to rubble. The cursed relic, now powerless, lay buried beneath the wreckage, its malevolent influence finally extinguished. As the first light of dawn began to pierce the horizon, Clara rose to her feet, her legs trembling. She surveyed the scene before her, the destruction a stark reminder of the battle she had fought. The twisted figures, now nothing more than shadows, had vanished, their tormented souls at last released from their suffering. Clara felt a profound sense of relief, but also a deep sorrow for the lives that had been lost to the curse. She took a deep breath, the cool morning air filling her lungs, and began to walk away from the ruins. The weight of the ancient book was gone, but its memories lingered, a testament to the darkness she had faced. Clara knew she would never be the same, but she also knew she had done what was necessary. She had broken the curse, and in doing so had given those trapped souls a chance at peace. Clara's journey had come to an end, but the scars it left would remain. As she walked into the rising sun, she vowed to remember the lessons she had learned, to honor the lives lost, and to live her life with the courage and determination that had seen her through the darkest of nights. The nightmare was over, but the story of Clara's bravery would live on, a beacon of hope in a world that had seen too much darkness. And as the sun rose higher, casting its warm glow over the land, Clara knew that she too would rise again, stronger and more resilient than ever before. Music swells to a reflective, somber note, then fades to silence. As Clara walked away from the ruins, she felt a strange pull, a force drawing her back to the place she had just left. She turned, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the smoldering wreckage. Something wasn't right. The air grew colder, the morning light dimming as dark clouds began to gather overhead. Clara's heart raced, her instincts screaming that the nightmare was not yet over. She took a hesitant step back towards the ruins, her mind racing with questions. Could the curse have survived? Was there something she had missed? The ground beneath her feet felt unstable, as if the earth itself was trembling in anticipation. As she approached the rubble, a sudden gust of wind whipped around her, carrying with it a faint whisper. Clara's eyes widened in horror as she recognized the voice. It was the same voice that had haunted her dreams, the voice of the ancient spirit bound to the cursed relic. "You thought you could escape," the voice hissed, its tone dripping with malice. "But the darkness is not so easily defeated." Clara's breath caught in her throat as she realized the full extent of the curse's power. The relic may have been destroyed, but the spirit's grip on the land remained. She knew she had to act fast, to find a way to banish the spirit once and for all. With renewed determination, Clara began to sift through the rubble, her hands trembling as she searched for any remaining traces of the curse. She knew the journey ahead would be perilous, but she also knew she couldn't turn back now. The fate of the land and her own soul depended on it. As the storm clouds gathered and the air grew thick with tension, Clara steeled herself for the battle to come. The return to the ruins marked the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with even greater challenges and dangers. But Clara was ready. She had faced the darkness before, and she would do so again. The haunting voice echoed in her mind, but Clara pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. She would find a way to break the curse once and for all, to free the land from the spirit's malevolent grasp. And as she dug deeper into the wreckage, a glimmer of hope began to emerge, a faint but unmistakable light at the end of the tunnel. The return had begun, and Clara knew that no matter what lay ahead, she would face it with the same courage and determination that had seen her through the darkest of nights. The story was far from over, and Clara's journey was just beginning. Music swells to a haunting, climactic note, then fades to silence. With the storm raging overhead, Clara felt an electric charge in the air, a sign that the final confrontation was imminent. She stood amidst the ruins, the echoes of the ancient spirit's voice still lingering in her mind. "Show yourself," she demanded, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her insides. The ground beneath her feet began to tremble violently, and from the shadows emerged a dark, swirling figure. The spirit had taken form, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. "You are brave but foolish," it hissed, its voice like nails on a chalkboard. "You cannot defeat me. I am eternal." Clara clenched her fists, her determination unwavering. "You may be eternal, but your reign of terror ends now," she declared. The spirit laughed, a chilling sound that sent shivers down Clara's spine. "And how do you propose to do that, mortal?" it sneered. Clara reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, ancient talisman she had found among the rubble. It glowed with a soft, golden light, a beacon of hope in the darkness. "With this," she said, holding the talisman high, "a fragment of the old magic, the power to banish you forever." The spirit recoiled, its form flickering as if it were losing its grip on this world. "No!" it shrieked, its voice filled with rage and fear. "You cannot!" But Clara knew she could. She began to chant an incantation she had discovered in the old texts, her voice growing stronger with each word. The talisman pulsated with energy, its light growing brighter and brighter. The spirit writhed in agony, its form becoming more and more unstable. "This is not the end," it screamed. "I will return." "Not this time," Clara replied, her voice resolute. With a final, powerful surge, the talisman unleashed a blinding light, engulfing the spirit and the ruins in a brilliant, purifying glow. When the light faded, the storm had passed, and the ruins were silent. The spirit was gone, banished to the void from whence it came. Clara fell to her knees, exhausted but victorious. She had done it. The curse was broken and the land was free. As she looked around at the now peaceful landscape, a sense of calm washed over her. The confrontation had been fierce, but she had emerged triumphant. The journey had been long and arduous, but Clara knew it was worth it. She had faced the darkness and won. And as she stood up and walked away from the ruins for the final time, she knew that she had not only saved the land, but had also found her own strength. The confrontation had ended, but Clara's story would continue, a testament to the power of courage and determination in the face of overwhelming odds. Music swells to a triumphant, climactic note, then fades to silence. The storm had passed, but the echoes of the confrontation still lingered in Clara's mind. She walked through the now tranquil landscape, the once dark and foreboding ruins now bathed in the soft light of dawn. Her heart felt heavy with the weight of the battle she had fought, but also light with the knowledge that she had triumphed. She paused near an ancient tree, its branches reaching out like welcoming arms. "It's over," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the gentle breeze. The talisman, now devoid of its previous glow, rested in her hand like a relic of a past era. Clara knew that the land would heal, just as she would. The scars of the battle would remain, but they would serve as a reminder of her strength and resilience. As she continued her journey, she came across a small village that had been untouched by the spirit's malevolence. The villagers, unaware of the battle that had raged so close to their homes, went about their daily lives with a sense of peace and normalcy that Clara found comforting. She smiled, knowing that her fight had ensured their safety. It was a small victory, but one that meant the world to her. Clara made her way to the village square where a small fountain stood. She knelt beside it, the cool water reflecting her weary but determined face. She dipped her hands into the water, feeling its soothing touch wash away the last remnants of fear and doubt. "Thank you," she whispered to the water, to the land, and to the ancient magic that had aided her. The journey had changed her, but it had also revealed her true self. Clara stood up, her resolve renewed. She knew that there would be other challenges ahead, but she was ready to face them. As she left the village behind, the first rays of the sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm, hopeful light on the path ahead. Clara walked forward not just as a survivor, but as a guardian of the land she had saved. The resolution of her journey was not an end, but a new beginning, a testament to the enduring power of hope, courage, and the unyielding spirit of those who dare to face the darkness. And so, with a heart full of determination and a spirit unbroken, Clara ventured into the future, ready to embrace whatever came her way. The music swells with a hopeful, triumphant note, then gently fades to a reflective melody as the screen fades to black. If you enjoyed Clara's journey, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this.